Moment. We are in a softening market for insurance, which is good news after a decade of a hard market. So because of that, Aon are hoping to minimise any impacts from the Roxburgh Entertainment Centre fire loss. And just a bit of information there that Aon do place our insurance in the London markets. So there to have their chats for this renewal period, and hopefully that will give us some good results this year. Next slide, please, Sarah. So these are our current policies. Our material damage and business interruption policy is for all our buildings. We've got commercial motor vehicle, all our liability insurances, and an excess layer down general and professional liability. We've got cybercrime, forestry, airport insurance, and specific insurance for drones. Very exciting, isn't it? So what we traditionally don't insure, roads, footpaths, bridges, thank you.
Don't bring your head a bit behind.
You're in sync. Roads, footpaths, bridges, we don't have fine art cover, we don't have underground infrastructure cover, and we don't have life or health insurance. So we did discuss the underground infrastructure at the 30th of July council meeting and agreed to continue self-insuring those assets. Time being. It is key to note though for the roads, bridges, footpaths and that underground infrastructure that if there were to be a major event caused by the natural disaster, that local government, central government would also pay towards the maintenance of those assets. Next slide, please, Sarah. So our renewal is currently underway. All our policies end on the same day, 31st of October, and our new ones will begin from the 1st of November. We've just had our 3 yearly property valuations completed, as well as our 5 yearly parts valuations. So that will give us some good data to work with for making sure that all our assets are covered appropriately. The biggest renewal is the material damage renewal because that includes everything that we own and want to insure. But the other renewals are fairly simple. We've already submitted our liability renewal. We are also working to make sure that our internal processes are improved so that if things change throughout the year, we make sure we're capturing everything appropriately. So that would be when we want to add new assets, remove them from our schedule, or where anything has changed materially inside a building. We want to make sure that our contents cover is appropriate. Next slide, please. So these are just a few key assets that we insure across the Maniototo ward. This service centre, swimming pool, toilets, the Maniototo Art Centre and Stadium, elderly people's housing, and the water and wastewater treatment plants. Big ones for this ward. And I'll fly through to the, I believe is the last slide, please, Sarah.
That was the last one.
Oh, that was the last one. Oh, in that case, any questions?
What has it gone up much?
So last year our premium stayed stable, which was really good. And we're expecting that it will stay the same this year. It may be too much to hope that it will drop, but we're not expecting an increase. Aon keep telling us the market is very difficult. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Cool. Thank you. I've met pretty much all of you. Probably I've met you. I'm Paul Morrison. I'm the Chief Financial Officer. So I'm going to be talking about the exciting subject of deficit reserves, post and internal loans, post districtisation, especially for the Maniototo. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip the reserves 101 type stuff and talk. Let's say the thing that you need to remember is that reserves are created from revenue sources, and the revenue sources are specific to an activity. So what that means is that you can't necessarily use a reserve that was created in the recreation space to fund water. It must be spent and fund the activity that you've rated for. And that's why we have all of these reserves. They're effectively the little jam jars. The internal loans are different. If you can move to page 7, I think it's going to come up with internal loans that way. So what are they? Internal loans are similar to creation of reserves. They're a method of project funding that defines a project cost, uses current reserves to fund the project, and sets a rating level to replenish the reserve within a governance group. And I'm defining a governance group. We have 5 of them effectively, the 4 community boards and the council. They're all separate governance groups. Effectively, what we end up with is money coming from a governance group to itself. So you take money out of one reserve and you lend it to the other reserve, and that reserve then pays back. That's not really a loan. That's taking money out of one pocket, putting it in the other. Internal loans, in the truest sense, can also be used to fund projects between governance groups. So what we have something like Cromwell, for argument's sake, where the council use money out of Cromwell as a loan to fund something in the district. That is a more true a loan, and there should be a repayment back to Cromwell from the district. So we'll talk about that when we get to the, there's a table in it coming up. So most loans are made between the lender and the borrower, and they're from the same governance group, i.e. you're lending to yourselves. So we have 4.09 million of internal loans at the moment. 2.848 million is, and that's in inverted commas there, is lent by a governance group to itself. So it's not really a loan, it's just shifting your money around. You go to the next page, please. So we have some issues, given that we've now districtised. What that means is that the council has taken over responsibility for levying rates at a district level for most of the activities that it undertakes. The only thing it doesn't now fund are the grants and promotions stuff. That still sits with the community board. And that's why you will continue to have a community board grants reserve going forward. Now, there are some issues here. Reserves and internal loans that are either created by targeted ward rates or rely on targeted ward rates for repayment. Now that we don't have those targeted ward rates being levied, they're all levied at a district level. Those repayments can't happen anymore because we haven't got a funding source for them. So the reserves that are sitting behind that effectively become stranded, and they can't be used for any other activity other than the activity for which they were rated for. And this is a result of the harmonisation of rates across the district. Deficit reserves and internal loans therefore cannot easily be returned to nil, which you should be doing that by the communities that created them via rates, because you don't have the rates being levied, and you can't take a district rate that everybody and apply it specifically to a targeted ward area. So for argument's sake, we have now brought all of the pools together. They are rated for across the district under a community facilities rate. That community facilities rate is designed to fund pools going forward from 1 July. You cannot take the money from that rate and apply it to previous deficits that community boards may have created in their particular swimming pool when it was in their area of control. Does that
So
make
you're
sense?
saying that if we had borrowed money off ourselves or off another entity to reline the swimming pool at $500, now you're on district wide with your funding model, the funding model then can't pay off the $500 here that we have lent.
Correct.
But if we're in a surplus, we would have to have spent that money in the pool to get rid of the surplus, or as it goes to the general pool.
I will come to that. That's exactly right. So we've got the situation where deficits have been created by all the community boards, not just this one. There are, you've effectively spent in advance of your revenue streams, and that's perfectly logical. But effectively now those revenue streams have dried up. So what we have to do is balance the deficits off against the surpluses in your area so that you end up with just the surpluses left.
We haven't got a surplus in our area, they have to be offset with the surplus of the council.
You are lucky you have enough surpluses to cover the deficits that you carry.
Okay.
In fact, all the community boards do, but it was touch and go.
Is that because of good management? Or lucky?
Well, I think that, see, the use of reserves, it's an interesting thing because we briefly talked about the promotion stuff carried forward from previous years. What you're actually doing when you set a rate to fund something like promotions, you're actually going to the ratepayers and saying, can I have $5,000 from you to fund these promotions? And it comes back to what you were talking about, Stu, in relation to if you don't spend it, you lose it. And building up reserves without a target to spend them on is probably not a good idea, because you're actually asking the ratepayer for money that you are not really looking at spending on a particular project. Yeah,
you just put it in your back pocket.
that's right, and that's not really.
But the problem with that, both you two gentlemen are new to the game here, is that like to the hospital came along out of the blue for $2 million, and it had the curling rinks and it had lots of the turf. That when they come to this community, they don't come for small packets, they come for big.
Yep.
And if the reserves were there, fair means or foul to a degree, would be rated at 20,000 a year, then the hospital wouldn't have been a deal like it had to be. So while I understand exactly the mechanism of this community only comes when it really wants something, it wants it big.
Yeah.
And it's hard because until you get the big on the ground, and then you go, well, that's it. Because technically, we should be funding reserves for about 200,000 a year.
Yeah, and look, I think that there are always those types.
Yes, and that's where we get caught.
So I don't think it's not a bad thing to go for reserves if you have a funding source that you can bring them back out of deficit and put them into surplus for whatever the next project happens to be. Districtisation has turned all of that upside down effectively. There are now no more ward-based rates apart from the grants and promotion side of it. Everything is now coming out of the district, and we are hamstrung in that you collected rates, reserves under one funding mechanism, and we've changed to another one. Going forward, the district will be creating its reserves that it needs to create for whatever projects and things that it wants to do. And that will have of the community boards in terms of what you guys want to see happening. But there's stuff that's happened in the past. We need to draw a line in the sand and say, that was history. We've got to deal with it, and we've got to move on. So this is what we're proposing here. This is the fifth time I've talked about this. Stuart, you would have heard it twice. Damon, you haven't heard it as many times.
I listened too.
Yeah.
I listened deeply.
So we've got a couple of problems. We've got deficit reserves we've got to try and eliminate. We've got surplus reserves that we can't really use going forward for the purposes that they were collected for under the community board control. And that's why they were talking about, do we need to go back to council to use the reserve, the grant. And how do we eliminate the internal loans, because they can't be refinanced or funded again either. So if we can move on to the next page, which I think should be the table, you can see the top 6 entries there are internal loans. Yeah, good. They're internal loans from one governing body to another governing body. So the first 3 is Cromwell, they've lent to the district, and they've lent to Vincent. And then the next three, the district have lent to Vincent. So those are loans in a truest extent with the two separate parties. The rest of the loans actually only have one party, and that's the community board. You've just pulled it out of a different bucket. Okay? Is that you okay with that?
Yeah.
Good. So if we can move on, so we have $4 million there in internal loans, and I said $2.8 million were between ourselves. So internal loans, what's the proposed treatment? So what we are proposing to undertake is where the loans are by a governance group to itself, we're going to write those off. Because we have an asset in the books and we have a liability in the books, we just write it off. There's no impact on the community by doing that. It in fact helps because you're not having to wait for the repayment. There is, as I said, there's no current ability to collect revenue from the appropriate ratepayer group, and it would run contrary to the concept of districtisation. I have been asked, can we set up and keep out one of our little loans? What that would mean is you need to have a differential in place, because you don't want to, well, I'm assuming the council doesn't want to, since it's gone through districtisation, doesn't want to have the district as a whole pay for stuff that's happened in the past, that decisions were made by different bodies. So you guys would have made decisions, for argument's sake, on the hospital. That wasn't Cromwell's decision. So we're not, I would suggest that they wouldn't want the district to contribute to that. So that's.
But isn't there a softening of all that out? I mean, because at the end of the day, district-wide funding, we paid for the Cromwell Hall because it became an issue. So is that not the same like a hospital, where a hospital has now been an asset, now that's been district asset and taken away, that it should be a softening, let us get out of that?
Well, the Cromwell Hall was funded out of Cromwell Downland reserves, and that was set in place before and reinforced as part of the districtisation process. I think, if I remember correctly, the councillors were pretty hot on making sure that the $45 million price tag was paid for from Downland in Cromwell to have no impact on the rest of the rate-paying district. What will have an impact on it is the ongoing operating costs that will now become district costs. The other case in point was the Roxburgh swimming pool. The Roxburgh Community Board gave $500,000 in total, but in two tranches of 250, with the second tranche being a loan to itself, and the ratepayers of the Roxburgh, the Teviot ward, would pay back. So the rates were increased to pay back into the reserve to replenish the reserve. That is effectively what it was doing. And
So
the money was rated at Teviot ratepayer to go back in and replenish the reserve. Right? That was what the purpose of it was. There was no loan. We called it an internal loan, but you can't lend money to yourself. So all they were doing was collecting money from the ratepayers to put back into the reserve and replenish the reserve and build that back up.
Paying themselves.
Paying themselves, yeah. Asking the ratepayers to pay themselves, yeah.
go back to that our hospital, because that's the one that's going to be the thing.
Yeah, well, I will, let's just go through it.
It might resolve it.
So here's the proposed loan write-offs. The hospital, you've given them the money, they've gone and done their thing, right? That money's left, the money's $2 million has left the building. And what you're doing is you're recouping the money through the farm and rates, which is exactly the same technically as what Roxburgh were doing with the swimming pool. You are recouping the money that you gave to the hospital. You're not asking the hospital to pay it, which would be a loan. You're asking the ratepayers and other funding sources to replenish the money that you gave out. And that's fine, except you can't, there's no rating implication that you can use now. That's gone.
Other than
The district paying for it.
the district paying for it, because now the district will generate the income from the rent. And the district is now taking over probably $6 or $8 million of land asset.
But the whole principle of districtization was for the district absolutely to take over and start rating for the ongoing costs associated with the district's activities. And if there was a loan between us and the hospital, like Maniototo Hospital had signed on the dotted line and said, here, we will pay you back $2 million, different story. But what we've actually said is, put it in a nutshell, the Maniototo Community Board has been approached by the hospital. They've said they need $2 million. You have said, we will take that out of reserves and we will give it to you. And that part of it is finished with. There's no, they've gone and spent their money. It's gone out of our books. What you have decided that you wanted to do over time was replace that $2 million back into your reserves from the ratepayer, not from the hospital people.
Right, yeah, ratepayer and the asset.
And the asset. And so the sources of income are from the ratepayer or the asset. Yeah.
Now,
So-
just on the asset, on the endowment land, I've just opened it up. It is for the purchases of the borough. So if the income's not been used to pay off this loan, it's coming into, can only be used in this budget.
No, of the farms, for the Barrow Nation, different stuff.
It's different.
It's
That's different, that's their only endowment land. The land we're talking about is the farms in Gimmerberg and Petera,
Which aren't endowment.
which aren't,
No,
they're
they're not endowment.
not endowment.
No, they're not endowment.
So what's the value of those ones? The issue that I'm probably the first to be supportive of district-wide funding, but the first to sell our community out of $8 million worth of land value that goes to the general pot.
Well, look, that argument was had at this
And
presentation.
it's the same with Gear Avenue. The proceeds of Gear Avenue goes into council's budget, and the council determine how it wants to apply that money from the land, which is not endowment land in Cromwell, but it's council and the council own the land.
So, districtisation, endowment land
Those were full.
goes to it. So the money that is earned off endowment land, like the Naseby Borough one.
Yep.
Can only still be spent in
Yep.
Naseby.
And
So-
this one isn't, this is.
It's not endowment.
That's not endowment land. So endowments will remain in play. And we have that issue with the same question around Cromwell, that there's endowment land all around the district. So each of those endowments will be, will have to be honoured as per the endowment. That's what we've got to do. So where there's not an endowment, the district has now taken over the income stream. So effectively the farms are going into district funds. Now you might say they should be benefiting the Maniototo, but the other side of it is the Maniototo is benefiting from the fact that you've got 5,000 ratepayers in Cromwell, or however many we've got in Alex, paying for other costs that would have sat with the Maniototo Community Board at a higher level. So it's a swings and roundabouts thing. So getting back onto the internal loans, these are the ones that are between governance groups. So we're proposing to write back to Cromwell and increase their reserve by $1.8 million. The district will decrease by 393,000. The list is there. Effectively, it's going to be, that will eliminate all of the, what I'm calling the true internal loans between governing bodies. The other ones we're proposing to write off because there's no way to repay them. So if we move on to the reserve side of it, there's this estimated reserves at 30 June 2025. Currently, there is 16.33 million in reserves. Got to say next page.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, good. And Maniototo has 1.993 million. If we can go to the next
How
page.
did we accumulate those reserves? They must have been in forested.
Those reserves, I've got a table of that. You've got, well, how about we go to that
So
table?
when we looked at doing the school Graham, we asked for reserves and I said you had no reserves in at the budget time, because we've got to use reserves in the funding
Yeah,
too.
I'll just go through the last, these couple of pages, then we'll get to the tables. So the proposed actions that we are looking to undertake to effectively eliminate the deficit balances in the Maniototo space. So the elected member has a positive reserve balance of 6,500. We're going to put 4,700 of that to the forestry in Maniototo, 1,500 to the Maniototo Art Centre, and $300. I had to get quite detailed here because your numbers aren't big, to the community hall Maniototo. We are then going to transfer from property general Maniototo 72K to the community halls in Maniototo. You'll get 36.4 thousand, Naseby Cemetery 22K, and the general reserve Maniototo, which is different from the property general Maniototo, 13,400. We will then transfer from Farm Wilson Road Maniototo 57,000 and transfer that to the Maniototo Hospital. There was a balance of 57,000 deficit sitting in that reserve. So that will eliminate that, and it's coming from the farm. So it balances out. That's where it should come from.
So to the Maniototo Hospital, the new hospital.
I don't know whether it was the new hospital. I just know there's a deficit sitting in the reserves of 57,000. I can check that out. But that's what we're trying to eliminate.
I would struggle to think we'd have a reserve of 57,000 in the new hospital, maybe for the old hospital, because we earned a fair chunk of that.
Well, if it's the old hospital,
Didn't you buy in 100K? Time ago,
To
a long time ago.
the old hospital.
The old hospital, the old hospital.
Yeah.
well, if it's the old hospital, we'll look at it, pulling the reserve money from somewhere else to recoup it.
Because we were 50% shareholder of the last hospital.
But we're also using, because
And the irrigation company's out of it.
the farm, next page, next page. So the last entry will be, we will transfer from the Farm Hall Wilson Road 53,000 to the general reserves Maniototo, because that was in deficit to the tune of 53,000 as well. So if we go to the next page, you can see this is your reserve breakdown. So on the left, this is what will be in the annual report for 30 June 2025. You can see all the negative numbers there. So all of those entries will offset those negatives. So if you're looking at why have you got 1.99 million, you've got a lot of money sitting in your recreation and culture space. There is $1.3 million sitting in there at the moment. Well, in terms of all of those.
Well, why didn't we have that when we looked at putting the turf in the school? Because we asked for reserves and stuff, so you've got no reserves in your accounts, because otherwise we've gone out to the community to fund it on our long-term plan, because if we had reserves, it was a perfect chance, because Vincent used their reserve to fund their turf. So we kept asking, and no, we didn't have
But
it.
remember, when you look at this, these are all tagged to things.
Yes.
So at the time you collected these for these particular activities. And so they were tagged to those activities. So it's a bit harder, but what Paul's saying now, we're probably going to do some of this, if it's in the general reserve, now how you can apply it, there's a little bit more freedom for some.
Yes, exactly.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So you're talking about the farms out here, say, and the money goes, once you come to the hospital, you pay, so it's not going to the hospital, it goes into the reserve. So if everything around Central Target that earns money, does it go into one reserve?
Effectively what it will do, that money comes into the activities of the council.
Yep.
Will be used to offset a particular rate. So instead of paying X amount, you'll pay X minus the farm revenue. That will be your rate that you'll need to collect. So it'll be like interest we have, it's a rates offset. Unless the council look at another way that they might want to apply that funding.
So if they earn $1 million, say, off council assets or whatever,
Yep.
and put it in the fund.
Yep.
it could be spent on anything, like if the council decide we're gonna spend $500,000 on, fixing up the building now, so is that what you're talking about?
Well, yeah, the council can do what it deems to be the most important thing. Now, it has choices. It could turn around and say, all of that money, we're going to use as a rates offset for argument's sake. So that will just go in and you will levy $1 million less in rates. They could turn around and say, well, we want to have a rates impact, because that would be just under 2% of your rates rise would come down. What they might turn around and say, well, we want $500,000 in a discretionary fund that we can use for, let's say, building maintenance. And the other $500,000 we'll use as a rates offset. So they take the $500,000 and then they decide what buildings need to be looked at, which are the most urgent buildings, and then they would apply money from that $500,000 to those, which also may lower rates impact because you're using other revenue streams. Because the object of best thing that you can do is increase your revenue streams and have the ability to have discretion over what you do with it. Now, what I would envisage is that since the revenue stream kind of comes from, and I think this is a personal view, it's not the council view, I haven't talked about this at all, this will be probably a new triennium. This is where the community boards, in terms of the forum boards, would be turning around and having input into, this is what I want to see in my area. And that then sits with the council, and the council makes a call on the importance and appropriateness of those requests. And the council then would need to find the relevant funding for that. And that might be some of it might come from the farm profits, some of it might come from rates, some of it might come from reserves. And I'll talk a little bit about reserves and surplus shortly. So those are the types of things the council will have to go through.
So the money, like you earn off everything in Central Otago, goes into a pond, and you can spend it on anything you like. It's not tagged to go here, there, or there.
No, the council.
The councils can decide we want to put all that money into something over there, and it's got nothing to do with anything where the money comes from.
And no, that's right. And what it does
Now,
is,
so district-wide funding there.
yeah,
Yes,
it effectively says that the council, in conjunction with the community boards, look at what the important things are that they want to achieve within the district, within the wards. And then if that meets the target, meets the level that they want to undertake, then they decide where they're going to fund it from. They don't or shouldn't look at it and say, oh, we've got $1 million here from the farms, let's go and spend this. It's more about, here's what we need to achieve. How are we going to fund it? Is it going to be from rates? Is it going to be from reserves? Is it going to be from interest earned? Is it going to be from other income from this farming asset that we have? So those are the things that the council will have to grapple with. And if they'll have to do that as part of the long-term plan, we'll be sitting and looking at that as we go through to June 27.
Because the classic and that's the gold mining royalties out of Roxburgh.
Yep.
They were in tagged to the community board for issues, and now they go.
Well, that's a little bit different. We could not find any documentation that said, here's the resolution. We found some discussion, but we didn't find a resolution saying this is what it's going to be used for.
So that income has gone in that situation and went to offsetting rates.
Yeah, but
Okay,
the rate is component to go into that roading reserve.
Yeah.
We didn't need it because we had that income stream.
so that income you're talking about from the gold mine there can be put into the big pot.
Yep.
Into the big pot, and it can get spent.
And this is the case, went into offsetting roading.
Well, it can go into a district thing, so where, for example, that money was into the emergency roading works fund, which meant we then didn't have to rate for that fund because there was no money going.
So it doesn't matter where the money comes from, it can go anywhere.
So
Sounds sensible.
classic. Well, if some Santana gets across the line and we get some revenue from Santana, that could be used down in Ranford. It's not tied to the economy.
And hence land sales, ultimately, in time as a whole of land sales, so actually we need something there, and that asset, so it's district-wide asset bank account.
It's very sensible for.
So their surplus is 1.9 million, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the surplus is 1.9 million. Really, the 346,000 of that is tied into reserves contributions. So that's your subdivision stuff. That is linked to the Maniototo. You cannot use that anywhere else, just as we can't use Vincent's down here.
So how can we use it then? Because it's tied into that.
Like it, yes, but if you come along and say, we have a great idea for a playground, you might want to put a market playground in. They're very expensive. That could fund part of that. Because that's what it's tied to. It's tied to recreation in the area that it was got from.
So a hockey turf at the school,
Um,
was that getting outside of?
it is outside of it because this is more tied in with growth. So if for argument's sake you have a playground that isn't cutting the mustard because you've got more people living in this area and more kids are in the area, etc., you could use that to build a new playground.
As a result of
That's the DC financial contributions are a bit more complicated from the legislative point of view in terms of how they have to be used, and it's not like a grant to a.
But if it was a grant to we would own the playground. What we're doing here is giving money to.
Then I think the school being way of doing school, and if we owned another facility down at the stadium, or a community facility, then it's funded.
So yes, exactly. So that's what that could be used for. You've got $1.32 million across those 9 or 10 activities. If you had something that came up that said we want to do something that you would have normally paid for it out of the recreation and culture charge previously, for argument's sake, you turn around and you say, we are going to build a new art centre. Okay. You can actually technically use that whole $1.3 million towards that art centre because they were all levied from the same rating source. We have just put these into buckets ourselves. So if you had a major project that needed a significant kickstart, you could use that money to partially fund it, fully fund it, whatever needs to be done with it. So you've got $1.3 million. It's a little bit more restricted because it is for stuff that you would have paid for out of your recreation and culture charge in the past. So it's more of a community facilities.
Well, we've got to wash that up, eh? It's got to be washed up.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a minute. You've got about $20,000 there on your service charge, which is a general charge, and $300,000 on your services rate, which is also a general charge. So those two can be used anywhere within your ward space. So that's how your 1.99 million comes about.
So why do we now understand that? We didn't understand that in the long-term plan, or did we?
Well, but remembering all this stuff was collected from these particular activities. And so like use the Ranford swimming pool as an example, when that heat pump blew last year, that would have come out of, you know, and that 200K would have been for the maintenance of the Ranford swimming pool going forward. Now that it's all districtised, this is what you had left over in that pot. And so these were all tagged to things that over the past had been considered important and had a line of funding attached to them, and which meant they could really only be used for that purpose, because that's what you went to your community stuff. Now, as we've had to wrap it all up, going forward, it's districtised.
So that $1.9 million, is it sitting somewhere, or is it?
Yes,
going to reserves? And the general reserve.
There is cash back there.
There is cash, it's not paper. So, and that money is meant to be spent in the Maniototo, or will it go into the general?
No, it's meant to be spent in the Maniototo. So when I talk about reserves and surplus, I can explain that a little bit better. But answering your question, Stuart, in terms of why did we do this at the long-term plan time? we had districtisation kick in. And then it was a very short turnaround, and we always knew that we were going to look at reserves later.
Yeah.
And later's kind of now the plan is to get this in front of council next week. There's a late paper coming, and I'm writing. I wanted to talk to the community boards first and let you guys know what's happening. To put this in place before the triennium ends, so that the council who started the districtisation process finishes it, because this is the last part of the districtisation process.
So if that all happens, yeah, is there, once it's washed up, it can still sit in a reserve attached to the Maniototo
It does.
in perpetuity.
Yep, you can sit it there and leave it there. There's no interest being earned on it, because you can't.
Because there's no place for it.
Because I can't give it just to the Maniototo ratepayers, because it's district funded. So it's just sitting there. And as it said at the beginning, it would become a stranded reserve. You're not doing anything with it. If I can talk about next slide, I think it should be reserves and surplus. So if you've got surplus reserves and you've got a lot of them, they will be at ward level. They cannot be readily utilised now due to districtisation. So the district can't come and grab it and use it for something else. So what we're proposing is that when funding is required for work within a community board's area of interest, the relevant ward is used first. So that's my fine arts centre, right? That if you guys had that idea that you wanted to build an art centre, and the council said, yeah, it's a great idea, we want to do that, we would use whatever money is in that. There's no money in that reserve because it had a small deficit, but say it had some money, we would use that money first, and then the district would kick in the balance, because that's how it should be. The district would have picked up and taken over, but it would use the community board's reserve specifically for that purpose first. So that's the proposal. So you don't lose your control of the assets that you might, the aspirations that you might have for your area, and you don't lose control of the funding that you might have sitting in your reserves for the things that you still want to do.
So can we put it can we transfer it into a trust account?
You are not a legal entity as such. The council is the legal entity. So it is council's reserves effectively. But the council operates this way, and it would have to, if it wanted to change it, to consult and say we don't, and that's effectively saying we don't want community boards to be dealing with this anymore.
Well, all I'm thinking of is like the promotions grant, and we're talking about grants funding. We've got a surplus that we've got that's been arranged from so many other pockets that people have paid rates on for so long that they've accumulated a surplus. Now, if it's BOU and council and we want to do something and there's money in the general pot, it's a part which I have been struggling my entire time on this board, is to make sure we've got a pot big enough for our promotion for our own group. So if it's been generated from 16 different entities, why don't we conglomerate it into one entity, which is our promotions grant or our trust fund, so the next boards for the next hundreds of years can invest for and instead of our 400,000, we've got a couple of million when we sold our hotel or we sold our power shares.
I see what you're saying.
It's not found money, that's not the right word, but it's been attached to everything in the community.
So your general rates are easier to do. So what you could ask us to do is transfer. You've got
the 1.2 million or whatever it is.
You've got 300,000 for it. No, the 1.2 million is tagged for activities that were funded from the recreation and culture charge. So that's your pools, your halls, your stadiums, those types of things. That's all they can be used for. So putting it all into one pot, I think it doesn't.
But I guess but the other side of that, if that's what it is that stays in our general reserves, if there's an upgrade of the lights that are over couple, there's an upgrade of the domain and irrigation down there, we can use it for that. use 35% of that there, the council parks and rec might come in the other 70%.
Yeah, if it's a park, yeah, if we're talking about that, I think we just got to get the terminology right. It's not a general reserve. It is a specific reserve tied to activities that were funded. So you couldn't, so funded from a specific source.
Yeah.
Recreation and culture.
Because I guess the problem with, we'll take some, give me something on the park down here. Whatever it
Well, let's take the stadium, right? You've got the stadium. So if you wanted to, I don't know, you wanted to build
put your curtains in.
another, well, no, you want to put, let's think big here. You wanted to build another stand, right? So you want to build another stand. You have got, where's there? We got the stadium there. You got any money in the stadium? I can't read it. Yeah.
329.
Yeah, so you've got 300 and, yeah, there you go. Couldn't see it for the life of you thinking. You got $329,000 in there, right? It comes in at $500,000. Then you've got two choices. The council might turn around and say, we've got other important things we want to do. And they can say that. You could then turn around and say, well, we will fund it out of our reserves. So you would take 329,000 out of the stadium reserve, and you could take the balance out of the pool, Redfern pool, for argument's sake. Right? So you could do that. Because you don't lose control of those.
No, and I guess what I'm saying, it's probably good, it's quite good to have it and understand it's attached to the place it's been funded for.
Yeah. The one that you can move around are the general rates. So you've got $300,000, 320,000 if we add the one above it, the 19,000. 320,000, that is general fund rates or general reserves that you can move around wherever you want to move it around, because it was collected from the people in Maniototo. They are the only ratepayers that paid for it. It has to be used in that space. So the council could turn around and say, oh, look, we want to do this thing with it, and it's upgrade the sports fields in the Maniototo. They could say that, and they could say we're going to use that money. But they should come to you first and say, well, this is what we want to do. What do you think?
But clearly we wouldn't want to use all our reserves up in the first hit. We might want to use 20% of it, because we've just given away major parts of our land assets to council. We want to have a percentage of that benefit.
And they can't have any money go into them. So eventually those
I'll
costs
just
will be
disappear.
gone, but there's not a time limit.
No,
on how
no,
to do it.
because I'm looking at the swimming pool in Naysmith, it's got reserves of $2. Domain's got reserves of $88,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess
doing a bit of work there, though.
I think they will need some discipline though, because the community will say, you're sitting on 1.9 million and you're now still rating us for X. Why aren't you running these down faster? Because that's giving us rates relief now. Yeah. So if we keep sitting that in our back pocket, there is a risk that the community will say, I'm getting all these rate increases, but I know you've got a reserve there. So I think you have to be disciplined in how we run that down.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're talking about saying ending that 329,000 for the stadium on the stadium, right?
Yeah.
And the job might cost $500,000, and the council go, no, we're not going to give you the other 150,000. Can we take that out of general reserves that we've got and put?
You can take it out of any of the reserves that have the same rating source.
What about the general reserves?
Or your general reserve? Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
But the argument to that, of course, is they're now paying rates for the Central Target District as a region. And you might say, well, we want to get a new lights around the car park in the Domain. That is our right to do that. It becomes a part of the Parks and Rec budget. And they go, oh, Ranford needs this and this in a long-term plan or in a community board. And we might contribute a percentage of it. I would contribute it because they're still paying the rates up there.
I know, but I think as a general rule of thumb, healthy for councils to have large reserves, because we only meant to be taking from our community what we need for the year we're in that. And every time we put it in our back pocket, we're effectively taking more money from our community than what we need.
Yeah, and the argument of this community is when you amalgamated and took our assets, our graders and our tractors and trucks and that from Maniototo, we went to Vincent and we got nothing. So they'll have the other counter argument over here, don't worry about that.
Well, we'll be dead soon, Stu.
I guess,
Well, look at this way, Stu, you might have $2 million to spend next year.
Oh, well, and then, but that's gonna be up for the new board, is to make sure how that works, and over time, that'll be a process to chip those down.
I would anticipate that these reserves won't change significantly in the next 2 years. I think that some good planning on
Yeah.
the infrastructure, be it the parks reserves infrastructure or car parking, street lighting, that type of stuff, you know, what you were just talking about. Those are the things that are going to feed into an LTP.
Yeah.
The council's going to look at it and say, that's a really good idea. We need to have it. How are we going to fund it? The funding part comes after the agreement that it's a good idea. That's kind of how I see it operating. And once you've worked it out, and it's a good idea and it gets itself into the 10-year plan, then you work out, well, okay, we can do that in year 3 and we can use the Maniototo reserves in some way, shape or form to do that because it benefits the Maniototo. It's more of a capital project, so it's kind of a one-off. So those are the types of things that need to be considered through your LTP process.
We need big discussions in the next group relatively early on if there's a change in tables and counts. I think that's not been really brought out and understood in a very basic system.
There needs to be prudent spending on.
Absolutely.
We're not going to go with Disneyland out here.
That's right. And the council, well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's that LTP process that you go through that you get bright ideas and they get honed down and rationalised and some drop off and some get pushed out and you come to a consensus. Absolutely agree. It's not. Absolutely.
But I guess looking at my big wide vision glasses on, we've got divesting of buildings. We've got maybe a art centre that isn't right. And maybe in that makes there's an ability to utilise some of the assets we've got that we're trying to divest. You have in the community that never knew this happened until we sit down with you today. And I guess there are discussions that we can have.
And those LTP discussions will be in the first half of
We have
next
to
year.
land those house by December next year. Has to be landed.
Well, you lead us all back, don't you?
Yeah. So what's happening next? I presented to all the community boards. You guys are last on the list. I am in the middle of preparing a paper to council to finalise the districtisation process by eliminating and transferring internal loans and eliminating and transferring deficit reserve balances. The effective date will be 1 July 2025 for this to take effect. It's going to the council meeting next week. And I'm kind of proposing that we put in the resolution that the bit about the surplus reserves so that it's on the books rather than just me talking about it. So it kind of, for it to change, it's got to be rescinded. So someone's got to make a conscious decision not to do it. And that's all I have. The next page is questions. I think you've had a good question around the meeting and it's been really good.
But you're in a reasonable position. I think Tibet's in a good position. They're about 850.
Yeah.
Vincent's probably netted everything out, isn't it?
Vincent is, I've just finished doing theirs and they just squeaked a zero balance. Effectively, they have used all of their reserves to pay for all of their deficits and all of their projected LTP costs that they put in. So they're
Zero.
Which is a good outcome, though.
yeah.
Well, they could argue that they did that through the turf and did that through stuff and got rid of their surpluses.
Yeah, they did. I mean,